In this episode, Yanto Barker, the founder and CEO of Le Col and former professional cyclist, shares his journey from early cycling success to establishing a winning cycling apparel brand. Yanto highlights the core values of Le Col and reflects on the balance between confidence and paranoia in entrepreneurship, drawing parallels between professional cycling and business dynamics. He reflects on his journey, the challenges faced and the lessons learned along the way, highlighting the importance of resilience and adaptability in entrepreneurship. Finally, he shares some life advice, encouraging us all to make sure we follow our values and passions in our chosen career to ensure fulfillment every day. I hope you enjoy. Hi, welcome Yanto to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have him on board. So, Yanto is chief exec of Le Col, as well as being a former professional cyclist. So, it's going to be a really interesting journey through his career, both professionally and then now into the world of selling lots of beautiful cycling apparel to mammals and athletes. And you can work out which one I fall into. So look, Yanto, thanks for joining us. It's always quite cool to give people that background as to how you've got to be CEO of the business and founder of the business. So they've got a bit of a reference point as to your character and how you got there, and then we'll delve into some of your answers, if that's okay.
Sounds good.
So kick us off. Where did it all begin?
Where did it all begin? Well, I think my relationship with bikes actually started really early when I tried to cycle to a town about 5 miles away on a trike when I was about 3 years old. And it might sound hard to imagine how that has any kind of significance to the world and life that I led in professional cycling after that. But actually, I was clearly at a young age demonstrating a fearlessness, a willingness to explore, a non-acceptance of boundaries and confines that I just didn't think applied to me. Or
a psychiatrist's dream start, that, isn't it? Oh, there we go. Let's unpick that.
Yeah. But I did get picked up, so I got home safely. So that was kind of my first sort of thoughts. But I had actually probably from then on, I had a lot of negative experiences with bikes, either falling off, getting lost in the rain, in the cold. And actually I remember thinking probably a few years in, when I was about 21, 22, it's actually quite impressive that I got past all those negative experiences, because that would have been enough to put anyone off.
Yeah.
Freezing hands and feet and, falling off and scrapes on the tarmac and all that kind of thing. But it must have been doing something for me that really resonated, because I persisted. I actually was quite good quite early as well. So fortunately, as a young teenager, I was better than all of my friends and very quickly sort of the best in the county. And then at 17, I was on the GB team. So it did progress quite quickly. And I remember I used to get the train into college, which is about half an hour. And occasionally I'd take my bike in and ride home. And I got kicked off the train because I hadn't booked my bike in advance. And so rather than riding the rest of the way in, I got about halfway on the train. Rather than riding the rest of the way in, I actually got on my bike and rode to the bike shop of the local club, which is Mid Devon CC. And I spent the day there chatting to the guys, the mechanics who I knew were my friends. And I said, I think I'm going to give up college. The train journey annoyed me so much. And I thought, I've got better things to do with my life than argue with train conductors about how much in advance I'd book my bike or not. So I literally went, and then after that, I cycled home. And I told my mum that I was going to leave college. I was 16 at the time. And was it okay? And she said, my mum's a very relaxed, an easygoing person. She said, yeah, fine, but there's only one caveat. I get family credit for you as long as you're in higher education. And she said, if that changes, then I'll need you to cover the gap. And I said, how much is that going to be? It was about £30 a week at the time. And I said, yeah, I reckon I can do that. Leave it with me. Made a few calls, did a few calculations on what I thought I could win over the season and how much that was going to bring in, and decided that was enough to give me the confidence to make the leap. So
basically, so they were the first entrepreneurial shoots of Yanto Junior coming out to think, how can I barter with my mother to get me to? Yeah. I mean, it's quite interesting. Did you have an ambition about what you could achieve, or you just thought, I really like cycling and I want to be good at it? Because
Well, I was
16, you hadn't done the GB stuff then, had you? Or
no,
had
hadn't
you?
done that
No.
then. Well, I was quite fortunate in that I lived very close to a professional at the time called Jeremy Hunt, who was he was riding for a Spanish team called Benesto at the time, but he went on to ride for the Sky team later in his career. And because he lived about 3 miles down the road from me, in the summer holidays, I would go training with him, and I could see the path
Yeah,
to
okay.
how to achieve a contract and get paid and it be your job. Whereas I think without that, the gap would have been bigger and it'd have been harder to kind of join the dots to see what I'm doing here as a 16-year-old and how that leads to a professional contract and earning my living from riding my bike. But actually, I think there are some, I could go into the psychology of this quite a lot, but from a physical point of view, I am a little bit odd in the sense that the more physically I can suffer, I feel like a sense of satisfaction. Even today, right? So if I'm not fully fit and I go out with some racers who are better than me, the faster we go, and the more I start to suffer physically in a fitness sense, not like I broke my arm. I don't
Yeah,
want
yeah, yeah,
I just get a sense of satisfaction. And I would say that now because it underpinned so much of what's required to get yourself in condition to be able to compete when you get to races, because you have to do it at home on your own, in the dark, in the cold, in the wet, when no one's looking. There's no one clapping on my
yeah,
5 hour rides on a Friday. Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
And um, and I just
So it's like that perverse enjoyment of the pain that drove you to go,
it
I'm going
was
to keep going, going to
it
go
was
further.
cathartic, and
Yeah,
I've thought about it a lot, and I'm sure there's lots of trauma reasons in my childhood why that is what it is. But basically, I just made that the fuel that directed. I gave it a channel and a purpose, and then I just let it run, and it
yeah,
really did fuel a very intense and passionate career for just under 20 years, really, with a few years gap in the middle.
yeah,
Um, and and that's kind of what I recognized quite early. I wasn't that old. I was still a teenager when I was realizing I really like this. I can deal with the pain. I can recover quickly. I'm strong. I'm actually quite good on a bike. Technically, I was quite good. Junior races, if anyone's ever done them, are the most dangerous in the world, because you're talking about young riders who haven't got the experience to understand what a gap looks like yet,
yeah,
uh, how the dynamic of a peloton works. So you are going to fall off a lot, and you are going to get taken out with no fault of your own.
yeah,
And you have to be able to bounce. You need to be able to get up, finish the race, and it not put you off, like I said earlier. So yeah, so I was quite, I was pretty good, and like I said, I was on the GB team at 17, so it didn't take long to feel like the progress gave me confidence that I wasn't trying to flog a dead horse kind of thing, and that
yeah.
my efforts were getting somewhere, and that was really exciting. So that's
Brilliant.
kind of where cycling for me began.
And so you got a few contracts, didn't you? Then you retired sort of around 2007 for the first time, and then you were missing that pain by the sounds of it.
Yeah. Well, interesting sort of story about that. So I basically raced full 10 years from 1996 till 2006. For a few of those years, I was junior, obviously, but I was making my living the whole time from that point. And um, I kind of got to the age where, there was a lot of talk about if, as an espoir, so under 23, if you hadn't made your full World Tour contract by then you were kind of behind the curve, and it was
Right.
unlikely
Okay.
that teams would look at you in the same way. And that realization was sinking in for me at 25, so 2005. And I was basically looking at the reality that I wasn't getting the contracts that I deserve. I could have kept going. I had teams, but I wasn't getting contracts that were going to give me any kind of financial security at the end of my full career. And while I wasn't World Tour riding the Tour de France, I was good enough to be looked after very, very well, basically have everything taken care of from a product, team, bike, often a flat or a house, provided as part of contracts. And I was in a bubble where I didn't really have to engage with the real world. I didn't have to sort out my electricity bill or council
Yeah.
tax. Like, it was all done. And in the sense that I was looked after so much. I was a little bit concerned that I'd have to look after myself at some point, and I was
Yeah, you knew you couldn't do this forever. It couldn't be in this
no,
sort of
uh,
bubble. Yeah,
exactly. And I was going to be 10 or 15 years older, having basically lived from a kid to nearly 40, being looked after like a kid. And that made
yeah,
me nervous. And I thought, I'm going to
yeah,
have to reinvent myself. I'd rather do it sooner than later. Psychologically, you're a bit more malleable at a younger age. We become more calcified as we get older. And so I basically took myself out of competition and never really intended to come back to cycling. I had no kind of plan. I just literally quit.
yeah.
Uh, and I thought I'd better get a job, and I did a few different jobs, which I hated. I didn't like having a boss. That's another, that's another probably characteristic to
Yeah,
founders.
yeah. I've made another note of that,
Yeah.
Yanto.
And my willingness to sustain discomfort was fueled by, I'd rather sustain my own discomfort than that inflicted on me by someone who I either don't agree with, I'm not fully aligned with, I'm not fully invested into the company that I'm working for. Whatever the situation might be, I felt like I'd rather just deal with my own hand and whatever I can create for myself.
Yeah,
Um, so I did a few different jobs. I didn't like them, and I came up with a few different business ideas. And I did a feasibility on with spreadsheets and a business plan for about three different businesses: holidays, coaching, bikes, components, and then cycling kit, so soft goods. And that was the one that I felt like gave me the the most excitement, that I thought I could scale, I could build, I could start. I didn't have any experience, and funny story, right at the beginning of the business I'd basically committed to go beyond the business plan, and I was going to start implementing the things that I'd written down as part of the strategy. And I just wasn't quite sure what to do, and I used to sit at my computer. I'd start the clock, and I wouldn't be able to. I'd basically force myself to sit there for 2 hours, not allowed to get up. I didn't know what I was doing, and after
yeah.
15 minutes, 20 minutes, and this was before, like, I had a mobile phone, but it was before apps and social media and everything. So you didn't have a distraction of just being able to look at YouTube for hours and hours at a time. So I was sat there, and then I'd start getting bored. So then I'd start Googling, what's this, what's that, what material, what brand, what factory. And it sort of just started coming together, even though I didn't have any idea what I needed to do from a step-by-step process. But I do
But did
think,
you know? Sorry, Yanto. Did you know by then that you wanted to create some form of apparel
yes,
brand, if that
yeah,
makes sense?
yeah.
Right. Okay. So
So I basically,
you had the
I'd
big
got
plan, but no idea of how to achieve it. Right.
exactly. So I'd kind of gone, yeah. I did a feasibility. I'd put the costs together, but I didn't know how to put it actually together. And then I was basically forcing myself to sit down at the computer until I could structure what comes up and put that into a plan. And one of the things I do think is not unique, but if you've had a coaching relationship, which I had from a young age, and a very um, rewarding one. I had fantastic coaches in my career, and people that I've missed a lot since I've retired because they're just
Mm,
wonderful people. But one of the things I think the real strength they gave me was I'm actually very good at setting targets and then breaking the targets down into the smaller increments and chunks to make it achievable, so you get down to one step at a time. And
yeah.
I can join the dots from the really, really micro all the way up
Very well.
to
Yeah.
macro. And I think that is a real skill that has enabled me to do a lot of what I do, ever since starting the business. Lots of phases of the business have really benefited from that. But anyway, so, I'm sat at my computer, I'm putting these ideas together, then I start calling and either sales calls about shops who might take the product, and then factories who might be able to manufacture. And then I just started putting it all together, and it did sort of, there's a while when you found something, I'm sure you'll appreciate this, while it's just while it's not public, it can move at my speed. So
Yeah.
if I do something on it, if I work on it, then it moves forward. If I do nothing, it doesn't move anywhere, but no one
Yeah.
knows it didn't move anywhere.
But it's fine. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's a point where you start telling people and making commitments, and then you start to become at the service of the business because
Yeah.
it starts to move at its own speed. And I really was quite clear about, I was careful not to let that out the bag too quickly before I was ready to give it my full
Because they were
attention.
just going to pull you on at their pace, not at
Yeah.
yours, as you were developing. Yeah.
And I mean that as well in a kind of psychological sense, because you can get a sense of like a real sense of terror if you feel like I've set this off in motion.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's going to need. I don't know who it's going to need. I don't know how it's going to need or how much of it. And I'm feeling really anxious about can I give it what it needs, you know? So I was quite cautious about how quickly I let that out the bag. But once I did, I kind of liked it then because you're accountable, your reputation's on the line. You know, if I tell people I'm making commitments, then I have a, you know, like my reputation needs to deliver that. That's really
Yeah.
important. And it kind of sucks you along then, but you kind of need to be ready for it. So that sort of happened in the first couple of years. But it was good. And we started to make progress. So that was also good.
And did you set a clear vision as to what you wanted Le Col to be, as in terms of the quality and the fit, or is that something that evolved as you tried different, you know, manufacturing techniques, etc.?
Yeah, so I would say there was some core principles and values that I felt like were really, really important. So I wanted it to be really relevant to a competitive athlete, even though we obviously deliver and manufacture products for all ends of the spectrum in terms of the
Yeah.
demographics. So people in flat shoes and flat pedals versus people trying to get the last 1% out of their skin suit in a time trial.
Yeah.
Um, and also things like um, I wanted, so when I said I didn't like having a boss, I wanted to create a working environment that I would want to be in as probably the most fussy and, you know, fragile
Yeah.
person that I would have working in the business. Because if I can make sure that it's a nice environment, it feels friendly, people have got all the resources they need to do their job the best they can, then I think we'll be in a good place.
Yeah.
And so that was a really important thing for me, even though I didn't have any employees at the beginning. So it was just an idea then. And also, I wanted the brand to be perceived as welcoming and inclusive because I'm someone who has been part of cycling right from the grassroots, from kids cycling all the way up to World Tour and every level in between. So I genuinely feel and associate with every individual wherever they are on that spectrum, even if
Yeah.
they're just going out 45 minutes to try and lose a bit of weight or to just try and get a bit of confidence, or body confidence. Like I actually know what that feels like. And I remember I can associate, I've written diaries literally all my life about my training. I still write a diary now. I think it's really powerful tool, but it just helps you assimilate the experience into something useful and something with that you can give structure to and then communicate and understand in a better way. So for me, the brand really needed to live up to that, not just quality and performance, but have something about it that made people feel at home, welcome, happy, and hopefully attracted to it in one way or the other.
And was that? It's a really interesting point. That was that a public thing you declared, or was it something you just said? This is how we're going to run this brand, you know, and this is how when I take people on, I'm going to look after them, I'm going to nurture them and grow them.
So in the early years, no, I wouldn't have. No one would have known that. That
Yeah.
would have probably lived in my head for a long time. But it was always something that I communicated. So if I spoke to you about the brand in the early years, I would give you all of this. I would explain this. I would frame it. I would picture it. I would position it within the market and the other competitors that deliver like products. And I found that when I was doing sales, which I did to shops, to individual people, if I met them on a bike, whatever, I had extremely high conversion rate.
Strange that, isn't it? Yeah.
I'm
They
very
got
passionate.
carried away by the
Yeah,
passion, yeah.
and I love it, and I've put a lot of effort into making sure the product delivers what I say it does. So you would have seen a little bit about the brand when you if you'd have spoken to me or come across me in the early years, and then as we sort of progressed, um, one of my favorite bits of feedback was if someone I knew went say on a cycling holiday to Mallorca, let's say, and they came back and they said, "Oh, I met someone wearing Le Col." In the early years, that was still quite rare,
Yeah.
very rare. Um, and my favorite bit of feedback would be if my friends said, "Oh, and they were lovely people," and I just thought, yes, we've sold to the right people. That's nice because there are certain other brands that I remember feeling like either looked down on or they just weren't
Yeah.
inclusive in a way that I just felt was unnecessary, and I really wanted to try and create the antithesis to that to make sure that we didn't get sort of lumped in that. Cycling can be a bit cliquey anyway, so it's almost like you have to overcompensate a little bit because it naturally sort of works its way into a clique anyway. So yeah, that was very much part of my thing, but it did evolve over the years as well. And actually, I would say I unpacked more of what I've just described there is like the kernel of it, and then we've unpacked it in how we express it in lots of different ways, whether it's advertising, even our photos and video collateral, who we employ, my senior managers, because they're really important in delivering the values and the culture that I want to embody as a brand. Because if you hire the wrong people, you basically can't get close to it. So
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, isn't it? Like you say, it wasn't written down, but when you've got some experience about what's gone well and what hasn't gone well, you go back and look at those guiding principles to go, actually, let's bring those to the fore because they were the things that were responsible for the success, and then now let's build on them and make them a thing. Because to your point, it's interesting, isn't it? Like you say, if I'd met you at some cycling event and you were showing me these tops, I'd be like, where do I buy? Because I'm sure the passion you put in. But when you're selling all over the world now, you can't unfortunately be there, can you? So you've got to try and bring that. Obviously, it's what the brand stands for, isn't it? And in terms of the values that you've got there, that if you can bring that and instill that in your team by treating them the same way you'd want to be treated, it goes a long way for a success of a business, in my view.
it does. And ultimately, a business is the sum of the people that work in it and the contribution they make, both the non-verbal soft nature in their emotional intelligence skills, as well as their logistical contribution in the roles that they hold and the responsibilities they have. And I really knew that and understood that. And I would say um, I'm quite good at like working out people's character, and it probably comes from a team building experience. So in my racing career, I changed teams every couple of years, and
Yeah,
you had to understand a new dynamic with new ingredients and new characters, and where there were strengths and weaknesses to those characters, and how a strength could be overplayed into a weakness or vice versa.
yeah.
And it really was something that I looked at and paid a lot of attention to as a rider, because ultimately, if you're trying to win, it's a team sport, and you need each of your teammates to deliver their contribution, so as you've got a chance, because you can't do it all by yourself. And that's one of the beauties of cycling, which is very strategic, that has a
Yeah.
huge overlap into business, I would say.
It is. It's interesting. When I started the agency, I met my business partner. We played rugby together, and I think the skills we learn, the same sort of thing of how do you work as a team, from especially when people from all kind of walks of life, shapes, sizes. It's like working out how you're going to work together. And we look now at some of our best team guys here, and they've all come from sports. They've all come, whether it was netball, hockey, rugby, football, it doesn't matter. They've all understand how a dynamic works to collectively work towards a common goal. And I know it sounds like a cliche, but it's so true, isn't it? And you see it. You can see people who aren't, because they just don't get it. It's like, why can't I just work in my sort of narrow lane?
Yeah, exactly. And I think the stats, they also show the same thing, both
Yeah.
across men and women, that people with either competitive or high level sports backgrounds just achieve more. Like it's true. I send my kids to sports camps and all that kind of stuff, just to make sure that they get it really, really early. They get those rough edges rounded off, and they get it, see what it feels like if you're selfish in a team sport or that kind of thing.
Yeah. Or don't get
Because
picked at first. Yeah.
yeah,
Follow that.
exactly. And we talk about it, and it's interesting. I think I would say a large part of what I've done in my life, more in business than in cycling, has been underpinned by intuition. So I literally used to dream the future in whether it was a deal, whether it was hiring someone specific, whether it was closing a round of investment or whatever. And it was like it was always like I knew what I was doing because I intuitively understood what was going to happen. But I spent a lot of time questioning it in the early years, like, well, how can I tell that's right? And
Yeah.
how can I know it will work, even though I feel like I've got a picture of what I need to achieve and what I need to do and the breaking down into the steps. There was always a nervousness that I could just be completely wrong. Now
Hmm.
I'm 15, 16 years into running a business and actually have a lot more calmness about the intuition now because it has a very good track record. And, some mistakes have happened not because of the intuition being wrong, but just even though it was correct, some other timing of something else, didn't fall into place or was complete anomaly like COVID, which, you can imagine is a complete curveball no one can predict.
Yeah, no one had really got that on their plan, had they?
Exactly. Or tariffs, whatever it might be in a more current topic. So it's interesting because I would say confidence is a really big factor as well.
Yeah,
Confidence to begin,
yeah,
confidence to do things that people say is not possible, confidence to go above and beyond the average, confidence to invest all of your, energy, finances. That takes a lot of confidence. And,
yeah,
I would say so many people fail probably because they just think, oh, I'm not sure if I could recover if this didn't work.
yeah.
Mm, and I say
But
I'm lucky with a healthy dose of confidence.
I think you've got to be able to back yourself, haven't you? Because like you will have many moments where you question it, but I suppose if you have a vision and you keep driving towards it, and you always keep that in the front of your mind with hard work, and that's going to come back from your cycling, isn't it? When you think I'll never get up that mountain, or I'll never catch that bloke who's already gone off. That you work out, yeah, you do sometimes. You're not all the time, because that's the whole thing about business or cycling, isn't it? You don't win every day,
No,
but I
no.
think if you always feel like you're moving forward to
Yeah.
that end goal.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, you have to kind of accept that you might do everything right and it still not work.
Yeah,
And I've always been very, very, this is where the diaries really help actually. For me, it's about working on a process that I've given really careful thought and consideration, and then I've executed the process or the strategy to the absolute best of my ability. Those are the bits in my control. The
yeah,
actual result, it's not for me to decide, because that
no,
depends on all the external factors, all
yeah,
the macro, and a lot of people again either take too much responsibility from something macro completely out of their control. They're in the right place at the right time and assume they're amazing and geniuses,
yeah,
or they don't have the confidence, even though they could and they should, and they have the strength and the capabilities, but they don't dare. And there's founders often have a very delicate balance between extreme confidence and extreme paranoia all at the same
yeah,
time, in
yeah,
a way that I've described this, quite a long time ago now in previous interviews, where I wouldn't have believed it was possible for a person, one individual, to be so confident and so concerned that they might fail at the same time. It was hard to reconcile how those two things can exist in the same character, but that's exactly what it's like.
mm-hmm.
So you're always on edge, looking for the problems and how to solve them, but you're equally supremely confident, thinking, "Well, I'm going to do it anyway, and it's going to work, and I'm going to find the answer, even if I don't know what it is from the
But it's
beginning."
interesting because doesn't the former, the on edge bit actually, it gives you the kind of like the healthy paranoia to make sure you've thought of everything. Like it's interesting what you said about that because I think that's really true, and I've seen that a lot. Is where this idea of get the odds stacked as best you can, and then Lady Luck will then look after
Yeah,
you or not. And sometimes
yeah,
it doesn't always work. But like you say, if you look in the mirror and go, "Well, I did everything I could have done. I didn't miss up," then that's fine. You'll go again, won't you? It's when you taking shortcuts and it's not quite happened, then you
yeah.
sort of deserve it.
So I've thought about it. I thought about it a lot because if you overplay either of those two characteristics, like the edgy
Yeah,
concernedness or the confidence, you actually become unbalanced again.
yeah,
And if you're too concerned and you indulge too much in the paranoia, the worry, you're in danger of burning out.
yeah,
Whereas if you're too confident, then you're not focused enough on the details. You're not paying attention enough to the things that will cause problems.
yeah,
And I spent a long time working with both of those ends of the spectrum. And one of the things that I came to was I really liked the martial arts analogy, which is how to be poised but not strained. And like Bruce Lee talks about it, if you read a little bit about him, and he's basically calm but ready. And it's a really powerful balance to be in, and it takes a lot of practice, a lot
yeah,
of breathing, and a lot of meditation in lots of ways. Like I wouldn't describe myself as a someone that meditates, but I'm often in a thought process that is meditative about the state I'm trying to hold myself in. as like something that's optimum. And because I don't want to burn out, I like my job, but it is high pressure. I do have expectations on me, and the buck does stop with me a lot of the time, basically. Uh,
Yeah.
and I need to be ready to solve those problems that I don't know what they're going to be, and I don't know when they're going to arrive. But I need to not be knackering myself out psychologically,
Yeah.
worried that any problem that comes over the hill tomorrow, the next day, could make me go bankrupt. And that would be so. I've lived with that for 5, 6 years at a time. So
Yeah.
uh, I had to come to terms with that.
Well, I think you do. You have to be respectful of it, but like you say, it could just dwarf you if you're not careful.
Yeah, totally. And it's a classic, right? As you build a business, and I see this now, as you grow, the you have to delegate a certain degree. Like, so a classic example, a classic sort of problem from a founder's perspective is they usually work to about 150% of sustainable time before they start delegating. And and then they realize that they're going to burn out. So I have to delegate 50%, otherwise I'm going to be over 100% and I'm just going to,
Yeah.
crash.
You can't keep going. Yeah.
But even employees, I see, as a department grows, they start to take on the weight of the whole department when it might have started there was just two of them and now there's six of them, but someone's not delegating very well and assuming too much responsibility. I find myself going in and having to, just understand why they're feeling the strain. And it's often self-imposed. Like
Yeah.
they realize, oh, I can give that to them. Oh, okay. That makes a lot of difference. And I'm like, yeah, you shouldn't be working till midnight. And that's not, you know,
Yeah. That's not good for
every
anybody.
now
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
again, before a launch of something, maybe, but really few and far between occasions. But it's interesting how some people don't develop that muscle, that skill, and they just
I
assume.
think it's one of the hardest things you work in your career. You learn because you like, without being arrogant, you sort of because you've done it for 5 years. There is nobody better to do it. But
Yeah,
to your point, you will burn out. So until you pass on that skill to somebody else, and then they pass it on to somebody else, you become a bit of a daft fool, don't you? If you don't pass it on, because
yeah, very much
it's
so.
not
So
a job that needs you either, is it?
no,
Sometimes.
exactly. Well, that's the other thing. Sometimes it comes from that exact place, as in people want to feel important.
Yeah.
So they say, "Oh, this couldn't happen without me," and that's always a flag to me. I've had people that have left this business who said, this business would never work without what I do, and I'm like, you're not.
Unfortunately, none of us are. Yeah.
I think a lot of employers will have heard that before, and
Yeah.
I just think for me, it's almost like a bit of a red flag to a bull. I'm like, right, you can go now because
It
I'll just.
gives an insight, isn't it, to what's going on in there?
Yeah, but I also, it's not right for a business to be beholden on one person, even to a degree. Me, in some ways, like I've been quite strategic to hire a very strong senior management team who, genuinely could do most of what needs to be done. My contribution sometimes is, a little thing on a week where it's about a strategy or it's about converting, a big customer or signing off a particular design or something. But actually, my team is very strong.
But I think you shouldn't belittle that though, in terms of as well looking, because all brands always need like that champion, that person that's not worrying about how we pay that manufacturer here or that designer there, and you're thinking, is that right? Should that be in the collection? Should that be the partnership that we should be doing? Because sometimes people will get stuck into the detail too much, and I think you need a founder who, if you cut you in half, you are Le Col,
Yeah.
that is a one that's like the champion of it, and it's a real skill. I think people forget that. They think, well, we don't need that. We know what the brand looks like. We know what the range is, and it's not. There's more to it, isn't it, as it
There
evolves?
is, there is. It's interesting as you were speaking. Then I was thinking, going back to the delegation point as well, and linking them both together. As a founder, you basically flex from I did every job at one stage,
Yeah,
and I was in every detail of every email. No email got sent without me sending it, and then no email got sent without me being CC'd in it. And as you get bigger and more grown up, you have to take a more elevated view.
yeah,
And so one of the beauties I really enjoy is when an individual has the expertise to flex right the way up and down the detail scale or the elevation scale. So right down to the front line and the detail, and then right up to the helicopter view that gives you a broad strategy in your 2 year, cycles and that kind of thing. And it's something that you have to you have to work on as you get more senior, because almost everybody starts in the detail. That's what you're doing, something in the detail. And then as you get more senior, you have to delegate better and then take a more strategic view with a more elevated view, which means foregoing some of the detail to make sure that you don't get stuck in the weeds. And I personally feel like it's important for me to be able to go all the way up and down that scale. And
Yeah.
so I can talk to someone, at the lowest level of the business with, confidence and understanding of what they're doing. Equally, I can speak in the board to investors about our 18-month strategy, or, how we're going to invest into this new work stream, whatever that might be. And you do notice when people fail. So sometimes you get people who are quite senior, but they are still too much in the detail. And you kind of see that, and it's often need a bit of coaching, and they need a bit of guidance to get to the right elevation level for their seniority.
Yeah, I also think if you don't fail, you don't learn either. There's a balancing act, isn't there? You've got to create a culture and environment that allows that failure not to become catastrophic to the business. Because if it's all, like to your point earlier, if it's all swimming along, then you don't actually learn like you should.
No.
And you've got to remember that pain. A bit like you, is like, taking the wrong corner or the clipping someone's wheel.
Yeah, agreed. It's a funny balance. For sustained success, it is a funny mixture of good luck, hard work, commitment, dedication, confidence, and paranoia.
Yeah, healthy paranoia.
Yeah,
Because the interesting bit we've not covered, although I knew this was going to happen, Yanto, was like you obviously retired and started Le Col, but then you decided you weren't busy enough and you went back to riding, didn't you?
I did.
So how did you manage to keep those two worlds going?
That's a really good question. It actually works perfectly to explain. I had to delegate before I used up more than 50% of my time contribution to the business, because I was racing. So basically, I didn't take salary from the business until it had been running for about 7 years, and that was because I earned a living from riding my bike.
Yeah, okay, so that gave you that input. Yeah.
But the really interesting thing about riding my bike and doing the business as well was I was an expert. So basically, I trained and raced my bike on the weekends, and I trained in the mornings. So for mornings and weekends, I was an expert, and for afternoons, I was a novice. And honestly, it really helped, like, me feel good about myself at a time when I was starting out and so new and so fresh and sort of green about business and what to do. Because like I would have definitely felt the weight of being a novice after having spent a good few years being very good at cycling.
Yeah.
And the fact that I could be a complete expert in the morning and weekends, and then a complete novice in the afternoons, I felt happy. I was fulfilled, and it kept me buoyant in a way that without the expert bit in the morning, I probably would have struggled psychologically quite a lot more.
So it's interesting, like you balanced out and became a normal person by doing the two extremes in the day.
Yeah. And there's one other thing. There's one other thing about training really hard as well. No matter how stressed I was at work, I had a dedicated morning of no screen time and really quite hard exertion where I couldn't think about the stress. So I got a forced rest. And then the last bit was, because I was training, I was still doing 400 or 500 miles a week. Even if I was really, really stressed, where I might not sleep very well because it's going round and round and I'm worried.
You were physically knackered.
I literally was exhausted from the training. So I also had a forced rest at night. And honestly, I really feel like that was the golden egg for me to be able to sustain working 7 days a week and the pressure of both jobs.
This could be the next self-help book we could write. They talk about these 5 a.m. club and all these sorts of things. This is it. Just make yourself so tired you can't not sleep and be worried about the business.
Stress anymore. Yeah.
There you go. I'm sure there's a lot of health in that. Yeah, because you spoke earlier about this. You wear so many hats. Obviously, when you kick off a business, you're a designer, you're collecting the money, you're an accountant, you're all these things, a marketeer, and all of that. And so that's really interesting, isn't it? That you'd already got that real variety with literally 2 jobs going on at the same time, and one very all-encompassing, like you say, because it was in weekends and obviously your mornings. So how did you find, if you could just sort of maybe compartmentalize off the Le Col bit, how did you find that, like, switching from I've been to the bank, I've got some money from them, I've been here, now I need to spend some marketing money, now I need to
Yeah.
create this. And
I
how did
mean,
you find that?
uh, well, basically, the only rest I had was while I was actually on my bike. So the only rest I had from the business was when I was actually on my bike or actually asleep. All the rest of the time, 24 hours of every other day, the rest of the day, I was in the team car on the way to races, emailing the bank about the overdraft facility that I was extending or whatever. I was on the team bus after 250k stages in Spain or Poland or somewhere, going through spreadsheets about forecasts and all that kind of stuff. Like, I really was dedicated, and any of my teammates at the time who will have been on Facebook and Instagram and whatever,
Yeah.
me with my laptop actually working through commercial aspects of the business. Like, I never switched off, and I still don't, to be honest. Like, I always spent a lot of time trying to make my day-to-day sustainable, so I don't need a holiday. And actually, I get bored on holidays, so I start picking up emails and doing things anyway.
Yeah.
But I love what I do, and like you just said earlier, you cut me, in half, and I will say Le Col through and through, and I
Like a
live.
stick of rock.
Yeah, I do. And actually, in many ways, in more recent times, I describe my role as, like, I'm the person who gives the last sort of pass over to make sure that the decisions we make carry the weight of the business, the full weight of the business.
Yeah.
It's been done, and I'm the checker. And 90% of the time, it's all fine. Like I said, I've got a very good senior management team. But every now and again, I'll pick something up, or I'll reconfigure something that really does make a difference. And it would be business critical, as in that could be make or break. And so I spend a lot of my time in between those big decisions being really tuned into the business, being fully clean and focused on what we need to do. So as when the time comes for that business critical decision to be made, I'm ready, I'm poised, and I'm fully clear on what we need to do in the context of whatever that work stream might be. And I trust myself on that. And so, my wife will joke about, oh, you're not very busy today. And I'm like, I'm thinking. And I'm making sure when they
I'll
need me.
try that at home, actually.
Yeah. When they need me, I'm here. That's the other thing, if there's a call on the weekend or 10 o'clock on a Sunday night, I'm available and I'm fully switched on and I'm ready to go. And that's something that it does take a very particular character not to be worn out, tired by it, and, your nerves jangling, because, 80% of my job is actually dealing with problems that I didn't know were going to happen. So that a lot of people don't like that. They want to know what's going to happen in their day from the moment they get into work to the moment they leave, and then they can feel calm. Whereas I'm the opposite.
I think understanding that, and also sort of working out what you do, like you've just said there, something that I think is really important. You love what you do, and so if you can, if we give a bit of career advice out on the podcast, if you can find a job in an area or a type of role that you can actually love every day, it won't feel like work, and so you won't. Because I think what sometimes people do is they resent work when it impacts in their social life. But
Yeah.
if you've been very lucky to build a brand that epitomizes you and your values and everything, then that's so lucky. And yes, it's hard work, and yes, it comes with loads of baggage. But every day you can go and look. And like, I think I've heard you talk a lot on other podcasts and interviews and stuff about, you still get a kick every time you see somebody wearing Le Col, which is brilliant. 16 years into a brand, isn't it? It's still, you look at the smile on your face now for those who are listening. I mean, it's just brilliant. And that's where it all is okay, isn't it?
I think I take it another level. I really like what you said there about values. And I've thought about this a lot. And I think anyone who's living and working at a discord to their values will be unhappy.
Yeah.
And I think for me, if you're wondering what to do, if anyone listening is wondering what to do or how to proceed or what choices to make, they've got, a fork in the road maybe in their career. If you pick what best serves your values, and if you don't know what that is, then spend a bit of time working out what your values are. Like, I just think it can transform your experience of your life, like almost 180. And it's something I spent a lot of time thinking about. And I was very fortunate. I said I had a lot of intuition in the early years. Well, a lot of my intuition was about my values and how to construct a framework for me to work in that was in keeping with my values, and I've really, really benefited. And I feel so grateful to however I've done that and wherever that came from inside me, and whether it's the courage and the clarity, and whatever. So I really think that is such a pivotal kind of thing to get right, which will
Yeah.
stand you in such good stead for feeling satisfied and fulfilled.
No, definitely. And do you think, obviously, because when you were building Le Col in the early days, you were still in the world of cycling. So do you think, because Le Col now, for what people don't know, there's a lot of collaborations, don't you? There's a lot of partnerships. You're very, very bright at leveraging new audiences and things like that. So do you think that came from the fact that you were still in that world and you could show your teammates, what do you reckon to this, guys? I'm thinking of this, and kind of have this collective market research always going on to see whether you were getting it right?
Definitely. Two things. One, most of my friends would have been, core demographic.
Yeah.
And two, I was core demographic. So when I say I was spending a lot of time thinking, not doing very much, I was going through in my head the journey that different brands have been on in the sector, the space that I've viewed Le Col to be fitting in, and how do we fully fulfill that, live that, and express that in everything that we do, whether it's the people we employ, or the videos that we make, or the partnerships that we sign up to. That's, I think coherence is a really important one. That for me, it's about making sure that everything in the extreme left makes sense to everything in the extreme right, and everything in the middle. Otherwise you end up with conflicting directions. I call them, it's like vectors, where the energy is moving in one direction at a certain velocity. And then you need to my job is lining all the energy up to serve that, to take out the barriers. But it's easy to inadvertently create conflicting vectors that then start pulling things in a different direction. And then you get a weird combination of the two, and it's not one or the other, and you completely missed both. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
Or you've got it right, and the whole turbo effect has
exactly.
carried you miles further than you've ever dreamt. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, like, just to take that analogy another step further, when it comes to getting buy-in, whether it's an investment, whether it's employees, whether it's partnerships, the more clarity and the more coherence you can communicate in a really, really obvious and simple way, the quicker the counterpart understands, the more clarity they feel, the more comfort they feel, and they know where it's going, the more they're willing to either invest or be part of or make their contribution. And I'd say, any young business people, like, you cannot underestimate the first 15 seconds of your conversation with a new investment partner or a new partnership idea. Like, so important, and it really does underpin so much good that happens afterwards. That's why I say you have to do the thousands and thousands of hours, so the first 15 seconds are really, really 100% on point.
Yeah.
Then the rest of it virtually takes care of itself.
Well, you give them that clarity, don't you, of direction, that they go, this person knows what they're doing. Let's get on board with it.
Yeah.
That's real.
Yeah.
That's real. It's fascinating. And so, look, if we look to the future, I mean, it'd be interesting just quickly share the sort of scale of the Le Col business now in terms of markets and range and partnerships, just to give people, because I think people might have seen a mate wearing a t-shirt or a cycling top or shorts at a weekend, and
Yeah.
maybe not got an idea of what you've built, because I think we should always have a small element of reflection and celebration.
Thank you. I'll give a pre-seed version then. So for me, Le Col has been, for many years, really been about performance. So some key partnerships that really sort of reflected that were the McLaren partnership, both in
Yeah.
Bahrain McLaren World Tour team, and also the McLaren Formula One car, heritage, which was amazing to be part of, and I felt really proud of that. It then led into the Bora Hansgrohe World Tour team, and we did that for 2 years, and we won the Giro, we won the stage of the Tour de France on the Champs-Élysées, plus the yellow jersey. Like, amazing experience
Yeah.
to watch, and really proud for me. Another one is we sponsored Joss Loudon to do the women's hour record, and she achieved that thanks to the investment we gave her to comply with all the testing
Okay.
pre-competition, which she had to do, and it's very expensive and she couldn't afford. But we believed in her, we believed that she could do it, and we believed the investment would be worth giving her that opportunity, and she did an incredible job. That was one of the best moments for me. But we have lots of other partnerships with people like Johan Museo, Bradley Wiggins, over the years have come and gone, and it's something that for me is about how do we express the true passion of cycling in its core sense to as many people as possible, and who embodies that, reflects that in the sector, in the market, that we can then join together with and hopefully create something that looks beautiful.
Brilliant. And in terms of the trading footprint, is it pretty much global, or are you still going for world dominance?
Yeah, we obviously we do sell to a lot of countries already, 150 plus, and now it's about, I'd say the next 5 years are about, we have very good market penetration in the UK, which is our home market, and it's about how do we achieve that in foreign markets. So Germany is a very big non-English speaking market. The US is also really important, along with other European countries. And it's about how do we connect with that audience in those countries to really give them the confidence that when they're looking at their next jersey, they, one, know about Le Col, and two, choose Le Col above everything else.
Yeah. Is it because obviously it's an English brand? Do people with the name Le Col think, oh, it must be French? Have you ever had that much
Yeah, so
feedback? Or
what's funny is if you go onto Google and you Google Le Col, some of the suggestions that come down are things like, is it Italian? Is it French? Is it English?
yeah,
And then some of the other suggestions are, is it owned by Bradley Wiggins, or
yeah.
all that kind of stuff. But yeah,
It's a wonderful place, the internet, isn't it?
I know, I know. We're an English brand with a French name that does the majority of their manufacturing in Europe and Italy.
There you go.
Yeah,
That's good. That's good enough. We'll get that. You can get all that changed on there.
yeah.
So you talked about the future as well. Yeah. So how can you see your role evolving in the future now? Because you've obviously taken investment throughout the years, haven't you, at key stages to fund the growth and to support the business. How are you seeing the next sort of 5 to 10 years roll out?
Like I said, I think we have done a good job in certain territories, and it's about designing a strategy to connect with an audience in some foreign language territories. So we have partnerships with a distributor in China. We're working with a marketing agency in Japan. These are really exciting. Just the fact that the little brand that I designed in
Yeah,
the
you're
first
having that
days on
chat.
my
Yeah,
kitchen table is now being sold in Japan, China, Eastern Asia, Middle East, everywhere. Like it's a bit surreal, and it's kind of, it's nice, it gives me a warm feeling, but also it makes me feel like there's real potential. And if I can engage that audience, then we can really take the brand a lot further and make it a lot bigger. And that's obviously the objective. So my role will remain, I am very aesthetic, so it matters to me what things look like, and both in terms of the collateral that we put together, but also in the ranges. And then I also have a central role in investment management, so communicating to the board, performance updates, reporting, all that kind of thing, and then governance. So making sure that we fulfill our fiduciary duties as directors, and that we're not exposing ourselves unduly to certain risks, whatever they may be and however they may unfold. As a tariff, again, example is a
yeah.
good one. So I have to stay up to speed on where the risks might be coming at, and what our solutions and yeah, what our actions may be to overcome them.
It's brilliant. There's a lot going on there, isn't it, to unpick?
Yeah,
But the key is the smile on your face when you're talking about those sorts of challenges is still there, isn't it?
I love it. Honestly, to me, it's all a game, and it's taken a few years to be able to say that. But even when it feels really, really serious, the stakes are really high. It's a game. It's a game,
Yeah.
and I'm not bad at the game, and I'll get better. So the longer I can be in the
I'll
game,
keep learning, I promise. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, exactly.
I think that is important, isn't it? Because we're obviously it is it's a serious matter to like when you're employing people, or when you're running your own business and you've got to put food on the table. You've now got a family, haven't you? It is serious, but it's not. I hate to say this, but it's not life and death. We're not surgeons performing, are we? We
Well,
are trying to run a business that can grow and employ more people and give happiness. That's the driver.
to me, what you just said there is exactly right, and it takes a while to fully let that sink in. And I'll tell you a little story. When I was at my most stressed was when I was so committed to the business personally, financially, that if the business didn't work, I would have personally been bankrupt. And I spent about 5 years in that place. So too long to not have to deal with it, and
Yeah,
long enough to really have to understand. And what I did was I started reading about people in history who really overcame adversity, not dealing with a little bit of stress that I've got. Um, and actually it made so much difference to put in context what certain people had been through and overcome, that it kind of made my
Allowed you
problem.
to process where you were, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And whether it was gangsters, so true stories about crazy, cartel people, or people in war situations, where I was like, well, I'm not dealing with anything like that. So
Yeah.
I can manage. If they can manage that, I can manage this.
Yeah. And go back to your diaries then, did that help you process a lot of this? But the fact of writing it down and maybe reviewing what had happened in the week or the day?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I think diaries are so powerful. You get two really, really useful things from a diary. The first is, because you don't think sequentially, when you write it down, you have to put it in an order. So actually, you sort of stop the thoughts spinning, and you put them in a
And
coherent
bring them,
sentence.
yeah.
The second real value, and that's really useful, by the way, because sometimes when you write it down, you go, oh, that's why I'm so worried. So I've
Yeah.
sort of, it's floating around, but I can't quite put my finger on it because it doesn't stop moving. And then you write it down and you go, oh, that's what it is. The second thing is, read them back. So I write a diary in a spreadsheet, which gives me the day, the log, and I put a couple of components in what I write down. But basically, at the end of each year, I go back and I look at the whole year in about 15 or 20-minute reading. And when you condense time, a year, into 15 minutes, you see patterns, and you go, well, that's what's happening. There's a trend, or there
Yeah.
are indicators that, or whether it's, we're working on certain work streams and everyone thinks it's going to be done in 3 months. And I'm like, I'm just going to check. Well, we did something similar to that last year and it took 9 months. And
Yeah.
it's because your meetings are once every 2 weeks. And it's like, well, okay, so if you want that to be 6 months or 3 months, you're going to have to do 2 meetings a week. Do you know what I mean? And just to get people into the right cadence, it's actually not rocket science, but once you join the
Yeah.
dots and you see the patterns, then you start going, okay, so how can I make that different? Well, I need to do two meetings a week instead of one every 2 weeks. Then we can actually legitimately expect it to take less time.
There's your second self-help book. There you go. You're going to become an author before you know it. I'll get you a deal. I'll go and negotiate you a deal. That's fine. You've got half an hour spare at the end of each day. I'm sure you're not cycling as much now.
No, I do, yeah, absolutely. But I'm not the what's the word? I'm not very good at writing.
No.
I'm not the academic one.
Spreadsheets.
Yeah,
Fine. We'll get a ghostwriter. Right,
yeah.
look, as usual, I've gone far too long, but who cares? I've loved every second of that. Quick bit of reflection. Go back to that train journey and that decision that young Yanto made. And I think you have to give your mother quite a bit of credit there too, don't you? But would you change that?
No,
I think I know the answer. Yeah.
not a chance.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because it sounds like that stayed with you, where you just went, "I'm going to go my path," and that has been pretty much in the back of your mind, driven every decision ever since, hasn't it?
I'm going to live my values. Actually, that train conductor has quite a bit to do with it as well.
Yeah, let's find him. Put a little picture on your wall behind you there with a little thing. This man kicked me off the train
Yeah,
and set me on this career path.
very much.
He is the true founder of Le Col.
Catalyst. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It'd be like the lady who you read Phil Knight's book, haven't you? Where the lady that designed the freelancer that designed the swoosh, the Nike swoosh, and at first she got paid like $200 to do it, and then he went back afterwards, didn't he, and gave her a big chunk when he'd sold out, which I thought was a wonderful story. I hope it's true and it wasn't just for the book.
Yeah.
I'm sure it is. Well, Yanto, thank you. I've loved every minute of that. It's a fascinating story, and I will watch on with great excitement as to the next chapters of Le Col. Mainly because every time I go out cycling with my wife, she's head to toe in your gear. So there you go.
That's nice.
Constantly, I'll think of you now.
Thank you. Well, I really hope there's something in here for people, and they can take some value from it. That'd be great.
There definitely is. Thanks a lot for your time.
Thank you.